Hi friends, and welcome to Folklore Diaries. Here, we share real-life horror stories and chilling legends from around the world. Some of them happen to our listeners, others have been passed down for years. So get comfortable but stay alert, because the next story might just keep you awake tonight. And if you like true horror stories, consider subscribing. Okay, let's begin. The government hospital in the old part of the city always carried a heavy silence after midnight. The narrow corridors smelled of antiseptic, and the faint hum of ceiling fans echoed against cracked walls. At night, the hospital seemed less like a place of healing, and more like a place where time stood still. Nurse Cheyenne, a woman in her late 20s, had worked here for 4 years. She was used to night duty, but no matter how many shifts she worked, she never got comfortable with the ICU after midnight. The ICU was always cold, always dimly lit, and the sound of heart monitors often felt like whispers in the dark. That particular night, Cheyenne had 6 critical patients under her care. Among them was Mr. Rahman, an old man struggling with severe lung infection. He had been on oxygen support for days, and everyone knew he was at the edge of life. Cheyenne checked on him around 11:30 p.m., adjusting his blanket gently. His breathing was weak, but his eyes opened for a moment. "You are safe here, Baba," she whispered softly, almost like she was comforting herself. By midnight, Mr. Rahman's condition collapsed. Doctors rushed in, but despite their efforts, his heart stopped beating. The long, flat beep from the monitor filled the ICU. The staff quietly performed the final duties, covering his face with a white sheet. His body was taken away within half an hour. The bed was cleaned, fresh sheets were laid, and soon the ICU looked as if no one had ever been there. But Cheyenne felt strange. She kept glancing at the freshly made bed, expecting to see someone lying there. Something inside her whispered that the bed was not truly empty. The hours dragged on. At around 3 a.m., a sudden alarm rang from one of the patient monitors. Cheyenne rushed to the corner bed where a young man named Javed was recovering from surgery. His face was pale, his eyes wide open, staring across the room. "What happened? Are you in pain?" Cheyenne asked, leaning close. Javed's voice trembled. He is here." Cheyenne frowned. "Who?" "The man who died. He was standing by my bed. He was looking at me." The nurse froze. She tried to calm him, but Javed's terrified expression was too real. He described in detail the same white sheet, the same old man's face, standing right beside him only moments before. Cheyenne glanced at the empty bed. Her heart began to pound. The corridor lights flickered faintly, and in the silence of the ICU, she could almost feel someone watching. That was the first time she realized, sometimes beds in hospitals are never truly empty. The next night, Cheyenne was again on duty. She told herself the previous incident was just stress, but deep inside, she was uneasy. Around 2:45 a.m., she was filling out patient charts when she noticed something odd. The curtain around the empty bed moved slightly, as if touched by a hand. She froze. The ceiling fans were switched off in the ICU, so there was no breeze. Carefully, she walked toward it. Her shoes echoed softly on the tiled floor. She pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. The bed was perfectly neat, as though untouched. Yet the faint smell of old tobacco smoke lingered in the air, exactly the smell that used to come from Mr. Rahman's clothes. Later that night, she stepped into the small monitoring room where CCTV footage from the ICU was displayed. Her colleague, Nurse Rafiq, was yawning over a cup of tea. "Strange night again?" he asked. Cheyenne hesitated before speaking. "Do you believe patients sometimes see things? Things that are not supposed to be there?" Rafiq gave her a tired smile. "Believe me, everyone working here has seen something, especially in ICU. They say the ones who die don't always leave right away." Cheyenne felt a shiver crawl up her spine. She didn't reply. Around 3:10 a.m., the monitor connected to the ICU showed movement. The motion sensor had triggered near the empty bed. Cheyenne leaned forward. The screen flickered, and for a second, just for a second, she thought she saw a blurred figure sitting on the edge of the bed. She blinked. The screen went blank again. Rafiq rewound the footage, but there was nothing visible. Only the sensor log showing movement detected at 3:10 a.m. That night, Cheyenne went home with her hands trembling. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined Mr. Rahman sitting on that bed, staring at her silently. A week passed. The ICU saw new patients come and go, but that one bed remained the same. No one ever lasted long in it. Patients admitted they always complained of strange dreams, or someone whispering in their ear. One even shouted in the middle of the night, saying an old man was lying beside him. Finally, one night, Cheyenne couldn't keep her fear inside. She approached the senior doctor, Dr. Anwar, during rounds. "Sir," she began hesitantly, "have you ever felt something wrong about that bed? The one by the far wall?" The doctor sighed, as if he had been waiting for the question. "That bed? You're not the first to ask. Years ago, another patient died there, an old man who had no family. They say he still lingers. Since then, many deaths have happened in that very spot." Cheyenne felt her blood run cold. That night, she made a silent decision. Around 3 a.m., when the ward was quiet, she stood by the bed and whispered, "Mr. Rahman, you are free now. You don't need to stay here anymore. Please rest." The ICU air grew colder. For a moment, she felt as if someone stood behind her. But when she turned, there was nothing. Only the sound of monitors ticking steadily. After that night, the strange happenings slowly reduced. The bed no longer triggered random sensor alerts. Patients stopped complaining of the old man. But Cheyenne never forgot the look in Javed's terrified eyes, nor the faint smell of tobacco smoke in an empty room. She realized hospitals carry more than just the living. Some souls, lost and lonely, stay behind in silence. And every time she walked past that bed, she whispered a silent prayer, because she knew one thing for sure. In hospitals, not every empty bed is truly empty. The city hospital in Manila was a tall, gray building with 10 floors. It was always busy, nurses rushing down hallways, doctors in white coats, patients and visitors crowding the lobby. During the day, the hospital looked like any other medical center, filled with noise, life, and movement. But at night, everything changed. The halls became empty, the lights flickered dimly, and the hum of machines echoed like whispers in the silence. And then there was the elevator, the old service elevator at the far end of the corridor. The staff avoided it after dark. It was said to have a mind of its own. Sometimes it would stop at the abandoned surgical floor on the 7th level, a place sealed for years. The operating rooms there were closed after a fire long ago. No patients, no doctors, no nurses, just dark and used rooms filled with broken equipment and dust. Yet the elevator still went there, even when no one pressed the button. Dr. Miguel Santos, a young surgeon in his 30s, didn't believe in such stories. He had trained abroad, and to him, ghosts were only tales to scare children. But one night, after finishing an emergency surgery at 2:30 a.m., he decided to take the service elevator instead of walking around to the main lobby. He pressed the button for the ground floor. The elevator shuddered, the doors closed, and it began to move. He leaned against the wall, exhausted. Then, without warning, the elevator stopped. The number above the doors lit up, 7. The doors slid open with a metallic groan. A dark hallway stretched out before him, cold and empty. The lights were broken, but the faint glow of the moon seeped in through a cracked window at the end. Miguel frowned. "Impossible, this floor is closed." Just as he was about to press the button again, he noticed something. At the far end of the hallway, shapes were moving, figures standing in silence. They looked like people in surgical masks and gowns, their outlines barely visible in the dim light. For a moment, he thought it was his tired mind playing tricks. But then, one of the figures slowly raised its head. Though its mask covered its mouth, Miguel could feel it staring straight at him. The elevator doors closed with a sharp clang before he could react. The lift moved again, this time to the ground floor. When Miguel stepped out, his hands were trembling. For the first time in his career, he couldn't explain what he saw. And in his heart, a seed of fear began to grow. The next day, Miguel tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was just fatigue. Maybe he imagined it. But when he asked the older nurses about the 7th floor, their faces turned pale. "Don't ever go there, Doc," one of them whispered. "That place is cursed." They told him the story. Years ago, the 7th floor was the busiest surgical wing of the hospital. But one night, during an operation, an electrical fire broke out. The flames spread quickly, smoke filling the operating rooms. Several patients died before they could be evacuated. Some doctors and nurses were also trapped inside. Since then, the floor had been shut down. Sometimes, the nurse added, the elevator still remembers them. It takes people up there, even if they don't ask. And those who see the ghosts never forget their faces. Miguel listened quietly, his heart heavy. He wanted to deny it, but the memory of those figures in masks haunted him. A week later, while returning from another late shift, Miguel found himself standing once again in front of the service elevator. He hesitated. The memory of that night flashed in his mind. But curiosity, and a strange pull he couldn't explain, made him step inside. The elevator started its slow descent. Miguel pressed the button for the ground floor, keeping his eyes fixed on the glowing numbers above. 10, 9, 8. Then it happened again. The elevator stopped. The number 7 glowed red. The doors opened with a moan. This time, Miguel felt a cold breeze sweep inside. The hallway stretched out in silence, the same broken lights, the same cracked window. But now, the smell of burned chemicals lingered in the air. And then he heard it, whispers. Low, soft voices, echoing in the distance. They weren't clear, but they sounded like doctors calling out instructions, like nurses crying, like patients gasping for breath. Miguel's chest tightened. He pressed the button frantically, but the elevator didn't move. The whispers grew louder, closer. And among them, one voice rose above the rest, sharp and desperate. "Help us." The figures appeared again. Only now there were more of them. Their shadows stretched across the floor, moving closer. Their masks were blackened, their gowns torn, as if burned in fire. One of them stepped forward, raising a trembling hand toward Miguel. Suddenly, the doors closed. The elevator jolted downward. Miguel staggered back, gasping for air. When the doors opened at the lobby, he stumbled out, drenched in sweat. Everyone stared at him, but he said nothing. How could he? Who would believe him? But from that night on, he avoided the service elevator completely. Months passed. Miguel continued his work, but the memory of the 7th floor never left him. Sometimes, while walking the halls at night, he thought he heard faint cries echoing from above. Sometimes, he dreamed of the elevator doors opening into darkness, waiting for him. One stormy night, during a heavy downpour, the hospital lost power. Emergency generators came on, but only half the elevators worked. The main lifts were out of order. Staff and patients crowded the staircases, but Miguel was called urgently to the ER. The fastest way down was the service elevator, the one he had sworn never to enter again. But he had no choice. A patient's life depended on him. He stepped inside. The dim emergency light flickered above. He pressed the button for the ER floor. The doors closed. The elevator began to move. And then, as if the hospital itself chose his fate, it stopped. The number above glowed, 7. The doors slid open. This time, the hallway was not empty. Figures in burned gowns and masks filled the corridor completely, their hollow eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The smell of smoke and blood filled the air. Miguel froze, unable to breathe. The ghosts stepped forward together, whispering in broken voices. "Stay with us, stay." The elevator lights flickered violently. The walls groaned. Miguel slammed the button again and again, praying for the doors to close. But they didn't. The ghosts reached out, their charred hands stretching inside the lift. The storm thundered outside. The hospital shook. And then, the doors slammed shut on their own. The elevator plunged downward, so fast Miguel thought it would crash. It stopped with a violent jolt at the ER floor, throwing him to the ground. When the doors opened, nurses rushed in to help him. He was pale, trembling, unable to speak. From that night, Dr. Miguel resigned. He left the hospital, never to return. He told no one the full story, but in his eyes lived a terror that could not be erased. And the staff still say, if you are unlucky enough to take that elevator after midnight, it might just stop on the 7th floor. And if the doors open, you may see them too, those who never left the fire. Because in that hospital, the elevator never stops. The government hospital in Dhaka was always alive during the day, patients filling the waiting rooms, nurses rushing with clipboards, the sound of announcements echoing through the speakers. But when night fell, the building seemed to change. The long corridors turned silent, the fluorescent lights buzzed weakly, and shadows stretched across the peeling walls. On one such night, Nurse Farzana, a young woman fresh out of training, was assigned to the night shift. She had worked here only a few months, but she had already heard the stories. Nurses spoke in hushed voices about strange sounds in the wards, patients claiming to see people who weren't there, and whispers coming from empty rooms. Farzana brushed them off. She told herself she was practical, strong-minded. Ghosts were not real. But that belief was shaken when she heard it, the sound that would haunt her forever. It was around 2 a.m. The ward was unusually quiet, most patients asleep. Farzana walked down the corridor to check on supplies when she suddenly heard it, the faint sound of crying. It was soft, almost like a child at first, but as she walked further, it grew clearer. The sound came from the row of plastic chairs outside the ward, the chairs where family members usually sat during visiting hours. Her heart beat faster. She slowed her steps and turned the corner. And there she was. An old woman sat hunched in the middle chair, her gray hair falling over her face, her body shaking as she cried. She wore a faded hospital gown, and in her lap lay a folded blanket. Farzana felt a rush of pity. She thought the woman was a patient who had wandered off. Gently she approached. "Auntie, why are you sitting here alone?" Farzana asked softly. The old woman didn't look up. She only whispered, her voice broken. "They left me here. They left me behind." Farzana's chest tightened. She knelt beside the woman, placing a hand on her shoulder. The skin was ice cold. "Don't worry, Auntie. I'll take you back to your bed. Which ward are you in?" Slowly, the woman raised her face. For a second, Farzana froze. The woman's eyes were dull, lifeless, and her cheeks were streaked with tears that never seemed to dry. But before Farzana could react, the woman whispered, "I want to go home." And just like that, she vanished. Farzana gasped, stumbling back in shock. The chair was empty. The blanket was gone. Only the echo of soft crying remained in the corridor. That night, Farzana realized the hospital was not only full of the living. Some of the discharged never truly left. The next morning, Farzana told herself she had imagined it. Lack of sleep, maybe. Stress. Nothing more. But she couldn't forget the woman's face. Later that week, during her break, Farzana mentioned the strange incident to Sister Anika, a senior nurse who had worked at the hospital for nearly 20 years. When Farzana described the old woman, her gown, her blanket, her gray hair, Anika's expression changed. The color drained from her face. "You saw her?" Anika asked quietly. Farzana frowned. You know her?" Anika nodded slowly. Her name was Halima Begum. She was a patient here 2 years ago. Poor woman had no family, no one to visit her. She stayed in the ward for weeks, always sitting in that same chair during the day. One night, she passed away quietly in her sleep. The next morning, her body was sent to the morgue. "But?" She hesitated. "But what?" Farzana pressed. Anika lowered her voice. Since that day, many nurses have seen her, sitting in that chair, crying, always crying. She never left. Some say she doesn't even know she's dead. Farzana felt chills crawl across her skin. But why does she stay? Why doesn't she move on? Anika sighed. Maybe because she had no family. Maybe because no one prayed for her. Some souls stay behind when they feel forgotten. That night, Farzana avoided the corridor as much as she could. But as the hours passed, her curiosity grew. Around 2 a.m., against her better judgment, she walked past the row of chairs again. Her steps slowed, her breath caught, and there she was again, the old woman, Halima Begum, sitting with her head bowed, crying softly into her lap. Farzana's heart pounded, but she forced herself to speak. "Auntie, do you know me? I'm here to help you." Slowly, the crying stopped. The woman lifted her head. Her eyes locked with Farzana's, empty and sorrowful. For the first time, she spoke clearly. "Don't leave me alone again." And then she disappeared. Farzana staggered back, her legs shaking. She knew now, it wasn't a dream. The woman was real, and she was trapped in this place. Days turned into weeks. Farzana couldn't escape the haunting presence of Halima Begum. Some nights, she heard the crying from down the hall. Other nights, she saw a glimpse of the old woman's shadow as she turned a corner. The fear grew inside her, but so did something else, pity. One evening, Farzana decided to do something different. She went to the hospital records room and searched through the dusty files. After hours of looking, she found it, Halima Begum's patient file. It was thin. No relatives listed, no emergency contacts, no visitors recorded. Only her name, age, and date of death. Farzana felt tears sting her eyes. The old woman had truly been alone. That night, at 2 a.m., Farzana returned to the chairs in the corridor. She sat down, clutching the file in her hands. The air was cold, and silence pressed around her. Then slowly the crying began. Halima appeared, her frail figure materializing on the chair beside her. The sound of her weeping filled the corridor. Farzana swallowed her fear. She opened the file. "Halima Begum," she said softly, "you are not forgotten. I remember you. I will pray for you." The crying stopped. The old woman raised her head. For the first time, her eyes seemed less hollow, her face calmer. Farzana continued, whispering prayers under her breath. The corridor felt warmer, the air lighter. And then, Halima smiled faintly. In the blink of an eye, she faded away. The chair was empty. The sound of crying was gone. From that night on, no one saw her again. Farzana told no one what she had done. But she carried Halima's memory in her heart. She prayed for her every night, hoping the old woman had finally found peace. And yet, sometimes, when she walked down that corridor alone, she thought she heard a faint echo of crying, so soft it could have been her imagination. But deep down, she knew. The hospital would always carry her presence. Some patients are discharged in paper, some in body. But their souls sometimes stay behind, waiting for someone to remember them. And Farzana had been the one to answer. Thank you for listening to tonight's story. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And remember, not every shadow is empty, and not every voice in the dark is in your head. Good night, and stay safe.